Here's a tight suspense-packed 30-second hook crafted for viral impact. The classroom fell silent as the calculus teacher circled Marcus's paper and read. "This," he sneered, holding it high, "isn't brilliance, it's laziness." The class laughed, but Marcus knew the truth. His method worked, and it worked better. What no one expected was that the mistake, Denton mocked, would ignite a storm far beyond the school walls, and expose a secret the teacher never wanted revealed. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The smell of dry erase markers lingered in the air. 20 students sat at their desks, heads bent over problems, but Marcus Hill felt every eye on him, though none were looking his way. He sat near the middle of the room, posture straight, a black spiral notebook balanced on the edge of his desk. Numbers had always made sense to him. They moved like music in his mind, patterns fitting together with quiet elegance. But lately, inside Miss Denton's calculus class, those numbers felt heavy, as though each one carried not just weight but judgment. Mr. Denton was a tall, thin man whose pressed shirts always looked stiff, as though he'd ironed the humanity out of them. His eyes were sharp and calculating, and though his words to the class carried the tone of authority, there was a distinct chill whenever he spoke. Marcus's name. "Mr. Hill," he would say, pausing just long enough to remind the room who he was addressing. "Do you have an answer, or should we wait until you're ready?" The words weren't cruel in themselves, but the way he delivered them, tight smile, tilted head, the faintest suggestion of exasperation, was a needle Marcus felt again and again. Marcus had learned to hide the sting. He would clear his throat, steady his hand, and speak with care, though he knew his classmates caught the subtle shift in tone whenever he answered. For others, a wrong attempt was met with encouragement. For him, a wrong attempt was evidence. Today the tension was worse. The problem on the board was long, a chain of functions stitched together into something intimidating. Mr. Denton had written it with the flourish of someone certain only a few would dare attempt it. "Who can walk us through this?" Denton asked, turning with a piece of chalk still in his hand. Several students avoided eye contact. A few fidgeted, their pencils suddenly fascinating. Marcus knew the answer. He'd been working through it in his notebook as the problem went up. Steps flowing naturally, his pencil paused only once before the solution came into view. But before he could consider whether to volunteer, he felt Mr. Denton's eyes land on him. "Marcus," Denton said, not a request, not an invitation. A decision. Marcus inhaled. "Yes, sir. Why don't you enlighten us? Take us through it." The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. A few students leaned back in their chairs, smirking as though preparing for a performance. Others tilted forward, curious. Marcus rose slowly, every movement deliberate, like a soldier stepping into an ambush. As he approached the board, he heard the faint whisper of laughter. Two boys in the back, muffled but sharp enough to cut. His jaw tightened. He'd heard it before. Little jokes about affirmative action answers, or lucky guesses. They never said it loud enough for Denton to stop them, but loud enough for Marcus to hear. He gripped the chalk. His hand trembled only slightly, but he pressed it firmly against the board to steady himself. Numbers flowed easily, derivative after derivative, chain rule applied, simplifications made. His steps were clear, each one checked twice in his head before appearing in chalk. Behind him, silence stretched. When he reached the final answer, he stepped aside, chalk in hand, and glanced toward Mr. Denton. The teacher studied the board. A long pause. Then, "Interesting," that word again. Not wrong, not right, just interesting. Marcus waited, chest tightening. Denton turned back to the class. "Does anyone see a flaw in Mr. Hill's method?" Several heads tilted, scanning the board. One girl raised her hand hesitantly. I think it looks fine." Denton's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Fine?" He repeated it like an insult. "Mathematics is not fine, Miss Parker. It is precise." He tapped the chalk against Marcus's final line. "This result, while not technically incorrect, relies on an approach that is, shall we say, unconventional." The word unconventional hung in the air. A few students chuckled quietly. Marcus stood frozen, his knuckles white around the chalk. But Denton continued. "It is acceptable." The class laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, but enough that Marcus heard it echo inside his chest. Denton hadn't said he was wrong. He'd said he was acceptable, as if excellence from him would always be downgraded, rephrased, diminished. Marcus returned to his seat, the laughter still humming. He opened his notebook, pretending to write, but the page blurred. He heard Denton's voice drone on about rigor, precision, elegance, but Marcus heard only the unspoken message: "You don't belong here, the way they do." Minutes passed like hours. His pencil tapped against the page, each click of graphite breaking off like tiny pieces of his patience. Then Denton's voice cut through again, sharper this time. "Class, since some of you appear a little too comfortable, let's try something different." Marcus looked up. Denton's eyes swept the room before settling on him again. "We'll end today with a small challenge," Denton announced. He turned to the board and began writing, his strokes faster, harsher. The problem grew line by line: nested functions, exponents stacked like bricks, variables twisted together until it looked more like art than math. Gasps rippled through the room. "That," Denton said, stepping back, "is your surprise problem." He underlined it with a flourish. "And Marcus," the teacher let the silence stretch, savoring it, "you'll be solving it for us, right here, right now." The room exploded with whispers. All eyes snapped to Marcus. His pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't a problem meant to teach. It was meant to break him. And Marcus knew, as the chalk waited in his hand, that his battle in this classroom had only just begun. Marcus now stands before an impossible problem, forced to solve it under every gaze in the room, knowing failure would not just mark him, but define him. The bell rang, but no one moved, until Mr. Denton set down the chalk. Marcus packed his notebook with careful hands, the surprise problem still burning behind his eyes. He felt the room's curiosity push at his back like wind. As he stepped into the hallway, lockers slammed, voices swelled. He kept walking, shoulders squared, as if the corridor were a narrow bridge, and any step sideways would send him falling. Outside, the air carried the damp smell of a day that wanted to become rain. He cut across the courtyard, following the cracked line where grass pressed up through concrete. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Working late. Don't wait up if the diner needs you. Proud of you." He stared at the words longer than he needed to, then slipped the phone back into his pocket and headed for the bus stop. Home was a second-floor apartment above a barber shop, where the hum of clippers drifted through the floorboards on weekends. The walls were a soft tan that his mother insisted felt like warmth, even when winter made the windows rattle. On the kitchen table sat a milk crate of textbooks his mother had rescued from a thrift store and wiped down like they were silver. A sticky note clung to the top one. "You'll outgrow these." "Hey, baby," his mother called from the tiny bedroom, voice tired but bright. "You eat yet?" "Not yet," Marcus said, setting his bag down. "Got a shift tonight. I'll grab something there." She stepped into the doorway, tying her hair back with a black scarf. Her scrubs were faded at the knees. A hospital badge dangled from a retractable cord. "How was school?" It was school. She tilted her head, reading him the way she read the hospital's supply cabinet. Quickly, efficiently, always seeing what was missing. "Mr. Denton?" "Same as always." She crossed the small room and put her hand on his shoulder. "You know what your grandma used to say? Some people talk like rulers, straight lines, and hard edges. You don't have to fit yourself to their inches." He smiled despite himself. Grandma could have been a poet. She was. Just one who made gumbo. She squeezed his shoulder. "I gotta run. Leave the porch light on. Text me when you get to work." After she left, the apartment settled into its familiar silence. Marcus pulled out his notebook and opened it to the page where he had started sketching a different way through the problem. The pencil lines looked like a map to someplace only he could see. He whispered steps under his breath, the way he always did when he needed to sharpen his thinking. "Compose inside. Don't attack from the outside," he said quietly. "Treat the function like a conversation. Listen first." Numbers were not just rules to him. They were voices. Derivatives asked what changed. Limits asked how patience behaved. He had fallen in love with the truth that math didn't care about race or zip code until someone wielded it like a gate. Then suddenly the beauty needed permission to be seen. At 6, he grabbed his jacket and took the bus to May's Diner, the neon sign flickering unease, like a stutter. The bell over the door chimed as he entered. The warm smell of coffee and onion rings wrapped around him like a blanket. Someone forgot to shake out. "Evening, genius," called Petra, the manager, her accent a long road from Prague to Jacksonville to here. Table 7 spilled soda. Bring the mop and your smile. Marcus tied on his apron and retrieved the mop. My smile costs extra. Put it on my tab, she said, snapping her gum. The diner's booths ran along the windows. Their vinyl cracked where countless nights had worn them down. Regulars occupied their usual posts. A pair of bus drivers arguing about routes. A retired postal worker folding a newspaper precisely. Two nursing students highlighting a textbook until it looked like a candy store. Marcus moved between them with practiced grace. Refill, wipe, nod, thank you. His mind solving and reshuffling the day's problem as if each step were a variable aligning into place. Near the end of the counter sat a woman who always ordered decaf and pie and wrote furiously in a little notebook. She had a gray streak in her hair that looked painted on, and eyes that missed nothing. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was to ask questions that felt like keys.
"What's your name?" she had asked on his first night.
Marcus. Marcus what? Marcus Hill. Good. Never leave your last name out of your own story. Tonight she waited until he passed with a tray of plates before she spoke. You're counting in your head. He blinked. I am. Your jaw tightens when you reach a conclusion. She tilted her pie plate. Another problem at school? He hesitated. The rule at Mays was simple. Keep things light. The regulars brought their burdens, then left a tip to thank the room for carrying them a while. But something in her gaze made it easy to be honest. Kelp, he said. My teacher thinks precision means doing it his way. I tried something different. It worked, but the way you arrived embarrassed him. I don't know about embarrassed. She smiled without warmth. Men guard their small kingdoms fiercely. He let out a short laugh. You a queen of one? Hardly. Unretired faculty. He paused with the tray midair. Faculty? Mathematics. Before that, a girl who wasn't supposed to do math. I collected egos the way the pastry case collects fingerprints. She slid a business card toward him, its edges softened by time. Elaine York. He stared at the name. As in, Dr. York? If the cap fits. She tapped the card. If you want, bring the problem next time I'm in. I enjoy seeing truth arrive by a new road. He tucked the card into his apron pocket like it might vanish if he blinked. Thank you. Don't thank me. Bring me a pencil. He finished his shift after midnight. The diner pulsing with late-night energy. A laughing table of EMTs. A couple arguing in whispers. A teenager asleep over a stack of French fries. He stepped into the cool air, breath smudging the glow of streetlights, and started home with the card pressed in his palm like a promise. At his desk, he opened his notebook again. The page waited, patient as always. He wrote down what Denton had written on the board from memory, restoring each curve and exponent until the problem sat there like a storm cloud. He traced a new path through it, changing order, simplifying early, reframing not as attack but as translation. Where Denton insisted on peeling each layer in sequence, Marcus looked for the hinge that would open the door. At 2 a.m. his mother returned. Keys rattled. Then the soft thud of shoes kicked off by the door. She shuffled in, saw him awake, and sighed. You'll turn into a ghost if you don't sleep. I'm close, he said. She sat, rubbing her wrists. Close to what? Making it make sense. She watched him, thoughtful. You know who you remind me of? Grandma? Her. Sure. But also your Uncle Leon, the one who rebuilt radios because he liked listening to the work. She pointed at the page. Go on then. Build it. He did. He found a line that collapsed two messy terms into something clean. Not by force but by listening to how they echoed. The answer rose out of the fog. He grinned before he could stop himself. I think I've got it, he said. Then rest, she replied. Win tomorrow on sleep, not on fumes. He slept. Dreams full of chalk dust and applause that kept stopping as if someone held a remote and paused only on his doubt. Morning brought rain. The bus hummed like a long exhale. At school, the hallway buzzed with pre-exam tension. Posters about integrity and excellence looked down like billboards from a city that wouldn't sell him an address. He slipped into the calculus room early, laid his notebook on the desk, and breathed in the sterile lemon of fresh cleaner. The board was spotless, as if last period's humiliation had never happened. Students trickled in, jackets dripping. A few looked at him quickly, and away like they were avoiding something contagious. He took his seat and reviewed the path he'd built through the problem, committing it to the reflex of his hand. He tried not to think of Denton's voice flattening the word acceptable. Behind him, whispers rose, thin and slicing. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. The words carried themselves. Bet he got the answer from a forum. Nah, he got it from pity. Teachers pass him because, well, you know. You think he's actually smart? Come on. He's a diversity story waiting for a headline. I hear the district is pushing for higher grades in certain neighborhoods. Makes the numbers look good. I heard his mom cleans at the school. Extra credit, right? Laughter pricked the air like needles. Carefully placed, meant to sting where a teacher wouldn't notice. Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck. His fingers curled around his pencil until it threatened to snap. Then a different voice, low and amused, joined them. Relax. He'll choke on the exam. Denton's got a way of making sure balance is restored. The pencil did snap. He didn't turn around. He just listened as the door opened. Mr. Denton stepped in with a neat stack of papers, and the whispers broke into practiced silence, leaving behind their smear like fingerprints on glass, right as the exam hit the desk in front of him. The exam papers landed with the crisp snap of authority. Marcus stared at the stack. Mr. Denton carried like it was both weapon and verdict. Each page slid onto desks with the rhythm of judgment. Thap, thap. When the sheet reached him, his fingers hesitated before taking it, as though contact alone might expose him. Remember, Mr. Denton said, pacing at the front of the room, clarity matters as much as accuracy. Mathematics is not a guessing game. It's proof of discipline. His eyes brushed over Marcus briefly before moving on, a glance sharp enough to cut. Marcus straightened his paper and scanned the first problem. He knew it. Relief spread through him like warmth. But it didn't last long. As he moved deeper into the exam, the problems grew longer, layered, deliberately winding. It wasn't just hard. It was exhausting, designed to test endurance more than skill. By the time he reached the final question, the clock was merciless. Still, he pushed through, hands steady even when his chest wasn't. When the bell rang, students shuffled forward to drop their papers on the desk. Marcus held his until last, offering it silently. Denton took it with 2 fingers, as if it weighed more than the rest. No smile, no nod, just silence. The next morning, the papers came back. Marcus's hands trembled slightly when his was placed on his desk. A large red B glared at him from the corner. Not failing, but not the A he'd expected after so many hours spent studying. He flipped through the pages. Every problem was correct, except for one where Denton had circled his solution steps and written, "Method lacks rigor." The answer itself matched the key. His chest tightened. Now Denton's voice boomed. Let's go over common mistakes. These are opportunities to learn. He turned to the board, picking one paper at random from the stack. Miss Parker. Misplaced a negative sign. Easy fix, but dangerous. Always double-check your signs. He smiled kindly at her as she nodded, cheeks pink with embarrassment. Another paper. Mr. Lee. Excellent approach, but be careful not to skip steps. Otherwise, strong work. Then came Marcus's name. Mr. Hill. Denton's tone shifted, sharper. He lifted Marcus's paper high. Here we have a perfect example of what not to do. A solution that produces the correct answer, but by unconventional shortcuts. And in mathematics, shortcuts are laziness disguised as genius. A ripple went through the room. Marcus felt heat rise to his face. Denton tapped the circled section with his finger. Do you see this, class? Skipping the formal proof to jump to a result. That may satisfy an online calculator, but it does not satisfy calculus. He set the paper down and added, precision, not creativity, is the goal. A few students chuckled. One whispered just loud enough, told you he guesses. Marcus's mouth opened before he could stop it. But I didn't guess. The step. Denton's chalk snapped against the board, silencing him. Mr. Hill, you've spoken enough. When you understand the discipline of mathematics, then perhaps your methods will hold weight. The humiliation settled heavy in Marcus's stomach. Other students slouched comfortably, relieved it wasn't them under fire. Some smirked, others avoided his eyes. A quiet consensus formed in that moment. Marcus Hill wasn't as sharp as he thought he was. At lunch, whispers followed him down the hall. He got called out. Denton said it was lazy. Guess he's not a math whiz after all. He sat at the edge of a table, tray untouched, while laughter echoed from across the cafeteria. His phone buzzed with a text from Petra at the diner. Need you tonight, double shift. But even work felt like escape now. That evening, he opened his notebook and spread the exam across the desk. He compared his method to the textbook. His solution was efficient, elegant in its own way, Yet Denton had reduced it to laziness. The word gnawed at him until he pressed his pencil so hard it broke. The next day, the tension escalated. Denton continued his habit of brushing aside others' mistakes gently while magnifying Marcus's. If another student missed a step, Denton laughed it off. Happens to the best of us. If Marcus missed a step, Denton's tone turned sharp. This is basic discipline, Mr. Hill. Without it, you're only pretending. The class began to mirror him. Side glances grew bolder, whispers louder. When Marcus raised his hand, some students rolled their eyes before he even spoke. The room had learned a new rhythm. Marcus equals mistake. Mistake equals lesson. It was a slow erasure, a dismantling of confidence in full view. And Marcus, though he tried to ignore it, felt pieces of himself chipped away each time. Denton used his name like a warning. Then came the twist. One afternoon, as the class buzzed with restless energy, Denton cleared his throat. Since some of you still struggle with applying what we've covered, I've prepared a special homework assignment. He turned to the board and began writing, his chalk scratching furiously. The problem grew and grew, layered with trigonometric substitutions and composite functions that tangled into something monstrous. Gasps filled the room. This, Denton said with satisfaction, will separate the disciplined from the careless. He turned, eyes locking on Marcus. And for some of you, it will be the difference between coasting and collapsing. The words hit like a slap. Denton didn't say Marcus's name, but he didn't have to. Every student knew who the problem was aimed at. A boy in the back muttered, "Guess we'll see if the shortcut works now." Laughter rippled. Marcus copied the problem slowly, the lines twisting on the page like thorns. He knew this wasn't just homework. It was a trap. And as he closed his notebook, one thought pulsed louder than the laughter around him. What if he wanted me to fail all along? Marcus walks home with the impossible problem, burning in his bag, realizing it may not be designed to test knowledge, but to break him. Marcus carried the assignment home like a stone tied to his back. The weight of it pressed through his backpack, into his shoulders, into his chest. Rain had slicked the streets, and the reflection of streetlights in the puddles looked like questions he couldn't answer. He walked faster, hood pulled up, shoes splashing silently. By the time he reached the apartment, the barber shop below was dark, its striped pole unlit. He let himself in quietly, not wanting to wake his mother. The small living room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional hiss of a car rolling past outside. He dropped his bag onto the table and pulled out the problem. His breath caught as he studied it. Even on paper, the problem looked hostile, tangled, almost mocking. Each layer of notation seemed designed not to test comprehension, but to confuse and punish. He sat down with his spiral notebook, clicking his pencil nervously. He wrote the first line, then crossed it out, tried another angle, scratched through it again. His eraser left smudges that spread like bruises across the page. Hours stretched. Midnight came. His mother's key rattled at the door. She stepped in, shoulders slumped, exhaustion radiating off her in waves. "You're still up?" she asked softly, noticing the papers spread before him. "Yeah, homework." She set her bag down and walked closer, eyes skimming the page. "That looks like Greek." "It might as well be," Marcus muttered. "Mr. Denton gave us this problem. It's impossible." Her face tightened. "He singled you out again, didn't he?" Marcus looked down, ashamed of how obvious it had become. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't let that man break you. You're stronger than he is." He wanted to believe her. But as she retreated to her room, the paper still glared back at him, a challenge that felt like a cage. By 2 a.m., frustration burned in his chest. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, pencil tapping against his jaw. He thought about Denton's words, "Shortcuts are laziness disguised as genius." But what if shortcuts weren't laziness? What if they were innovation? He leaned forward again, flipping to a clean page. He rewrote the problem, not as a burden but as a puzzle. He whispered under his breath, a habit he had since childhood. "What are you really asking? What are you hiding?" He circled terms, boxed variables, drew arrows where traditional methods said not to. He began rearranging the sequence, treating the functions less like barriers and more like doors that could swing open if nudged differently. Slowly, something emerged. It wasn't in the textbook. It wasn't in the neat proofs Denton worshipped. But it was elegant, a path that cut straight through the thorns without breaking any rules of math itself. His pulse quickened. He tested it again, rechecking each step, waiting for the flaw to reveal itself. But it held. Again. And again. The numbers bowed to it. Marcus sat back, breath heavy, heart racing. Against every warning, against every humiliation, he had discovered something new. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A text from Petra. "You okay? You looked tired yesterday. Don't burn yourself out, genius." He smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed locked on the page. He wanted to tell someone, anyone, that he had done it, that he had found a way Denton couldn't have predicted. But he also knew what it meant. If Denton had dismissed his method before, he would tear this apart with twice the fury. Marcus whispered aloud, almost to steady himself. "It works, but it's not his way." He closed his eyes, exhaustion threatening to drown him. In the quiet of the room, he thought about more than math. He thought about how every step in life felt like this, forced to prove himself twice as much, only to be told it was still not enough. Denton wasn't just a teacher, he was the voice of a system that kept moving the finish line. Marcus thought about his mother, scrubbing in at the hospital while others dismissed her as just a nurse. He thought about his grandmother's stories of walking miles to a segregated school, about how she called books weapons no one could steal. He thought about every whisper in the hallway that said he was only there to fill a quota. He bent back over the page, gripping his pencil tight. This wasn't just math anymore. This was his dignity in symbols and lines. By 4 a.m. his body begged for rest, but his mind wouldn't stop. He ran the method again, refining it, simplifying. Each time, the solution appeared faster, cleaner. It was no longer a desperate attempt. It was mastery. And yet, a shadow lingered. If he presented this, would Denton acknowledge it? Or would he twist it into humiliation again? Marcus stared at the page, jaw tight. "If I show this," he whispered, "I might prove I belong, or I might just hand him another weapon." The apartment was still when dawn broke, pale light seeping through blinds. Marcus's mother knocked gently on his door. "You're still at it?" He looked up, bleary-eyed. "I think I found a way through." She stepped in, her tired smile a fragile shield. "Then you did more than he wanted you to. Remember that." He wanted to nod, to agree. But deep down, he knew tomorrow wasn't going to be about what was right. It was going to be about who had the power to define it. As the sun rose, Marcus gathered his notes. His method gleamed on the page, bold and defiant. He tucked it into his notebook, slid it into his backpack, and sat silently on the bed, staring at the wall. He could already imagine Denton's voice. Sharp, dismissive, cruel. He could already hear the laughter waiting to follow. But he could also imagine something else. Something that scared him even more. The possibility that his method worked so well, it would expose Denton's weakness. And that thought made his pulse quicken in a different way. Marcus closes his notebook, realizing his solution doesn't just solve the impossible problem, it dismantles Denton's entire perfect approach. The notebook felt heavier than usual in Marcus's bag the next morning, as if the pages knew the risk they carried. He sat on the bus, staring out the window while his fingers pressed against the zipper like he was guarding a secret. The city rolled by in muted grays, rain streaking the glass in crooked lines. His eyes stayed on the reflection, his own face staring back at him, steady but tired. At school, the halls buzzed with chatter, lockers banging open and shut. Marcus walked with his head up, but the whispers found him anyway. They came from corners, from half-turned faces, from students who didn't bother to lower their voices enough. Man, he only gets by because Denton feels bad for him. No, it's the opposite. Denton's tougher on him, but the school doesn't want complaints. They'll pass him no matter what. I heard he copies answers from the diner customers. You know, like some college kids who feel sorry for him. Please. He's just a charity case. Each word was another stone thrown at his back. Marcus tried to push past it, but the sting clung like static electricity, impossible to shake off. In calculus class, the atmosphere shifted the moment he entered. Some students looked at him with smug amusement, others with thinly veiled pity. Marcus could read their faces as clearly as the equations he solved. You don't belong here. He sat, opened his notebook, and kept his eyes fixed on the blank page before him. But even the silence was hostile. It wasn't empty. It was full of judgment he couldn't see but could feel. When Mr. Denton strode in, crisp shirt tucked too neatly into ironed pants, the room straightened like soldiers before a drill sergeant. He placed his papers down, adjusted his glasses, and looked around. "Good morning," he said in that flat, authoritative tone. I trust you've all completed the problem from last night. The students shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded quickly. Others avoided his gaze. Marcus's pulse quickened. He had worked until dawn. He had found something no textbook offered. But Denton's words from yesterday echoed like a curse. Shortcuts are laziness disguised as genius. Let's begin, Denton continued. I'll be asking several of you to present. Mathematics is not done in isolation. It is tested in public. His eyes scanned the room, pausing only briefly on Marcus. A girl in the front row went first. She stumbled through the problem, lost halfway, then admitted she hadn't finished. Denton smiled indulgently. That's all right. You'll get there with practice. Another student tried. His steps were muddled, the logic shaky. Denton gave a gentle correction and moved on. Then Denton's gaze landed squarely on Marcus. Mr. Hill. The name hit like a gavel. Marcus's throat tightened. Yes, sir? Did you attempt the problem? Yes. Then you'll be sharing your solution. At the board. The room stirred with sudden energy. A few students leaned forward, grins spreading. Others whispered quickly, words Marcus couldn't catch but didn't need to. He already knew the tone. He rose slowly, notebook in hand. Every step toward the board felt deliberate, each one heavier than the last. The chalk waited in its tray, innocent but sharp as a blade. As he reached for it, whispers grew louder. He's about to embarrass himself. Bet he doesn't even get past the first line. Watch Denton tear him apart. Marcus pressed the chalk against the board. His hand trembled slightly, but he steadied it. He opened his notebook to the page where his method gleamed like forbidden scripture. Behind him, Denton folded his arms. We'll all be watching closely, Mr. Hill. Show us how you arrived at your result. Marcus hesitated. He could present the traditional way, mimic the textbook, and survive. Or he could show his method, the one he had discovered in the dark, and risk being torn apart again. His chest rose and fell with each breath. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice. Don't let them shrink you to fit their measure. He put chalk to board and began. The first steps looked familiar enough, following the expected path. But then Marcus pivoted, sliding into his unorthodox method. The shift was subtle but clear, and whispers broke out immediately. What's he doing? That's not the way Denton showed us. He's messing up already. Denton's face remained unreadable, though a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. Marcus kept going, steady now, lines of chalk flowing smoothly. The problem began to unravel under his touch, each step revealing a cleaner path forward. He reached the final solution, underlined it, and stepped aside. Silent, not admiration, not applause, just silence that vibrated with judgment. Denton finally spoke, voice clipped. Interesting. Marcus's chest clenched. The same word as before. Denton turned to the class. Do you all see the issue here? Mr. Hill has again chosen to avoid the disciplined approach, creating something that, while not entirely wrong, is dangerously misleading. Whispers erupted. Smirks spread. A few laughed outright. Marcus's jaw tightened. But the answer is correct. That is not the point. Denton snapped. Mathematics is not about stumbling into the right answer. It is about respect for the process. And this, he gestured at the board, is not respect. It is arrogance masquerading as insight. The words hit harder than any failing grade. Marcus stood frozen, chalk still in his hand, as the class shifted from quiet judgment to open dismissal. See? Told you. He just makes stuff up. They only let him slide, because, well, you know. The room pulsed with ridicule, each whisper louder than the last, until Marcus felt swallowed by it. Denton's voice cut through the noise. Here is what we'll do. Since Mr. Hill believes he has a superior method, I will assign him, and only him, a special problem to complete by tomorrow. He will then present it to us again. The class erupted into laughter, some slapping desks in mock applause. Marcus's heart sank. The trap had been set. Mr. Denton writes another problem on the board. Complex, merciless, then turns to Marcus and says, "You will show us tomorrow whether genius truly lies in shortcuts." The next day felt heavier before it even began. Marcus woke with the taste of dread in his mouth, a bitterness that no glass of water could wash away. The notebook sat on his desk, its pages filled with his midnight work. He had rehearsed the solution over and over, whispering steps until the words blurred, trying to build armor out of certainty. Still, he knew armor didn't matter if the man with the gavel refused to recognize it. By the time he reached the classroom, Whispers had already settled into the air like smoke. Some students leaned against desks, grinning like spectators before a show. Others kept their faces neutral, but their eyes sharp, waiting. Marcus took his seat, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. Mr. Denton entered with his usual clipped stride, his leather briefcase snapping shut as he placed it on the desk. He didn't look at Marcus right away. Instead, he turned to the board, picked up the chalk, and underlined the monstrous problem he had assigned the day before. "Class," Denton began, voice even but carrying a sharp edge. "Yesterday, we saw an example of creativity. Today we'll examine whether creativity stands against discipline." His eyes flicked to Marcus. "Mr. Hill, please join us at the board." A murmur swept through the room. Marcus rose, his notebook in hand, and walked forward. The floorboards creaked under his steps, each sound echoing louder in his head than it should. When he reached the front, he set the notebook on the chalk tray, opened it carefully, and picked up the chalk. The room stilled. Marcus began slowly, writing the first step in neat, steady strokes. He spoke as he went, his voice measured, not loud but clear. "We begin by simplifying the inner function. If we reduce it first, the outer layers become manageable." Some students frowned, already sensing the difference in his approach. This wasn't the rigid sequence Denton had drilled into them. It was a reshuffling, a reframing. Denton's arms folded across his chest. His eyes narrowed. Marcus pressed on. He showed how the substitution collapsed part of the problem, cutting through what had looked impossible. He boxed a section neatly, then moved to the next step, his chalk tapping lightly against the board. Whispers rose. "Wait, that actually makes sense." "Yeah, but that's not how we learned it. He's skipping something, right?" Marcus ignored them. He focused on the rhythm of his work, the steady breathing, the controlled movement, the numbers falling into place. His unorthodox method carved a clean path forward, one that revealed the answer faster than the textbook ever had. By the time he reached the final line, the solution glowed on the board, precise and undeniable. He set the chalk down with care and stepped aside. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the mocking hush of yesterday. It was heavier, charged, like the moment before a verdict is read. Marcus's chest rose and fell, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had done it. The answer was there, undeniable, correct. For the briefest moment, he allowed himself to hope. Then Denton spoke. "Fascinating." The word was cold, almost clinical. He stepped closer to the board, examining Marcus's work like evidence. "But let us be clear. What you see here is not mathematics. It is improvisation." The class shifted, confused. Some students exchanged glances. Others leaned in, waiting for the blow. Denton tapped one boxed section with the chalk. This is not rigor. This is the illusion of efficiency. It may arrive at the right answer, but it undermines the very foundation of calculus. And what is mathematics without foundation? Chaos. A ripple of uneasy laughter spread. Marcus swallowed hard. "But the steps are valid. Every transformation follows the rules. I checked them over and over." Denton turned, his eyes sharp. "And yet, Mr. Hill, validity is not the same as truth. Anyone can manipulate symbols. True mathematicians respect process. You seem more interested in shortcuts than in scholarship." The words landed like hammers. The silence in the room was no longer charged with possibility. It was charged with humiliation. From the back, a student whispered, "Guess he's just good at looking smart." Another laughed. "Yeah, until Denton shows him up." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, the sting sharper than he expected. He had proven himself, but the proof had been stripped of its dignity, recast as arrogance. Denton turned back to the class. "Let this be a lesson. Correct answers mean little without respect for method. What you witnessed today was a performance, not mathematics." He gestured at Marcus with a dismissive wave. "Take your seat, Mr. Hill." Marcus stood frozen for a moment, every muscle taut. He wanted to shout, to demand fairness, to show them again, step by step, that it was real, but the smirks around the room told him it wouldn't matter. The verdict had already been written before the trial began. He walked back to his desk slowly, the notebook heavy in his hands, his body burning with shame he didn't deserve. The rest of the class blurred into noise. Denton lectured about discipline, about order, about the dangers of arrogance. But Marcus heard only fragments, each word twisting like a knife. Structure, Respect, proper rigor. The board still displayed his solution, perfect, precise, undeniable, and yet it hung there like evidence of a crime. As the bell rang, students poured out, voices buzzing. Man, Denton destroyed him. Told you it was all just show. Shortcut king strikes again. Marcus stayed seated, staring at the empty board, his hands gripping the edge of the desk until his knuckles whitened. Finally, when the room emptied, he stood and gathered his things. But just as he reached the door, he caught sight of something unexpected. Elaine York, the woman from May's diner, was standing in the hallway. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back, her eyes sharp, focused on him. She must have been passing by, or maybe she had come for something else entirely. She gave the smallest nod, as though she had seen everything. Marcus froze, breath caught. If she had witnessed the trial, then maybe, just maybe, someone finally understood. But before he could step toward her, Denton's voice cut across the room. Mr. Hill. Marcus turned back slowly. Denton's face was unreadable, his tone even colder. You will rewrite this problem tonight. From the beginning, using the proper method, and tomorrow you will show us again. Marcus's heart sank. The trap wasn't finished. It was only tightening. Denton dismisses Marcus with a final order, determined to break him completely, forcing Marcus to choose between erasing his discovery or standing against the teacher's authority once more. The classroom was nearly empty when Marcus finally lifted his eyes from the chalkboard. His solution still lingered in white dust, undeniable yet condemned, the ghost of something both brilliant and dismissed. He felt the weight of Mr. Denton's command, echoing in his head. Rewrite it. Do it properly. My way. Marcus gathered his notebook and stepped out into the hallway, where Elaine York still stood. She didn't speak at first. Her gaze was steady, like she was measuring him, not the problem, not the solution, but the person holding them both. You wrote something clean, she said finally, her voice low, and he tried to dirty it. Marcus blinked, startled by the precision of her words. You saw? I saw enough. Don't erase it. She leaned in slightly. Never erase what they fear. Before Marcus could reply, a group of students rounded the corner. Their laughter was sharp, pointed. One of them caught sight of Marcus and sneered. Hey, Shortcut King, heard you're getting a solo encore tomorrow. The group erupted, and Marcus's face burned. He clutched his notebook tighter, Elaine's words echoing louder than the mockery. Don't erase it. That night, the apartment was dim and quiet. His mother had left a plate of reheated pasta on the table, with a sticky note. Eat, sleep. Don't let them win. Marcus sat with his notebook open, staring at Denton's assignment. Rewrite the solution using the proper method. Every line felt like a chain, forcing him back into the mold Denton demanded. He picked up his pencil, hovered over the paper, then dropped it, his hand clenched into a fist. His discovery wasn't wrong. It wasn't laziness. It was innovation. To erase it would be to erase himself. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his pulse hammering. His mother's voice from years ago floated through his memory. Baby, the world will always try to make you smaller. Don't help them do it. Marcus closed the notebook and whispered into the stillness. I won't. The next morning, the classroom was buzzing before the bell even rang. Word had spread. Denton was going to make Marcus redo the problem in front of everyone. It wasn't just math anymore. It was spectacle. Students shifted in their seats like an audience waiting for the curtain to rise. Marcus entered quietly, head high, notebook under his arm. He felt the eyes on him, the whispers wrapping around him like barbed wire. But beneath the fear was something new, something sharper. Defiance. Denton strode in, crisp and confident as always. He set his briefcase down, adjusted his glasses, and tapped the board with chalk. Today, he announced, we will correct yesterday's performance. Mr. Hill will now demonstrate the proper solution to the problem, step by step for the benefit of us all. He gestured toward the board. Mr. Hill. Marcus rose, the notebook heavy in his hand. He walked forward slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. He picked up the chalk, opened his notebook, not to the proper method, Denton demanded, but to his own pages of discovery. He began writing. The first line looked familiar. Safe. But as he moved to the second step, the divergence was clear. He was following his method again, the unorthodox path Denton had condemned. Gasps rippled through the room. Is he really doing it again? He's asking for it. Guess he likes failing. Marcus's hand trembled, but his voice rose, cracking but steady. Math isn't about memorization, he said, the chalk squeaking as he underlined a transformation. It's about discovery. If there's a cleaner path, if the logic holds, then it's valid. That's what problem solving is, finding ways others didn't see. The room hushed. Even the mockers leaned forward, caught off guard by the rawness in his voice. Marcus pressed on, his words layering with each line of chalk. What's the point of numbers if they can't bend to new ideas? What's the point of teaching if the answer matters less than obedience? Denton's jaw tightened, his arms folded across his chest, his silence louder than any outburst. Marcus finished the solution, chalk dust clinging to his fingertips. He stepped aside, breathing hard. The answer shone on the board, clear, efficient, flawless. For a moment, the room was silent. Then a boy in the back whispered, almost grudgingly, "He's right, it works." Others murmured, confusion spreading like sparks catching dry leaves. They had been taught Denton's way was the only way. But the answer was right there. Undeniable. Denton finally stepped forward. His eyes cut into Marcus like knives. Enough. Marcus's chest tightened, but he stood firm. Denton turned to the class. Do not be fooled. What you see here is not brilliance. It is recklessness. Mr. Hill insists on undermining instruction, turning discipline into chaos, and chaos has no place in mathematics. His voice sharpened, each word landing like a gavel. Mr. Hill, you will admit your method is wrong, or you will face the consequences of academic insubordination. The room stilled. Students held their breath, eyes darting between Marcus and Denton like jurors awaiting a verdict. Marcus's pulse thundered in his ears. Every fiber of him wanted to sink back into his seat, to survive quietly. But something stronger burned now, an anger that refused to be silenced. He met Denton's gaze, voice low but steady. It's not wrong. The class erupted in whispers. Did he just? No way. He's finished. Denton's expression hardened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but making sure every student could still hear. Admit it's wrong, Marcus, or I will make sure this defiance costs you more than a grade. The words froze the air. The ultimatum was clear. Compliance or destruction. Marcus stands at the board, chalk still in his hand, faced with Denton's ultimatum. Erase his discovery, and admit defeat, or risk his entire academic future by holding his ground. The silence after Mr. Denton's ultimatum felt like it could break glass. Marcus stood at the board, chest rising and falling, chalk dust clinging to his fingertips. The weight of 30 pairs of eyes pressed against him, waiting for his collapse. But he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't erase his work. He let the answer hang there, perfect, undeniable, and condemned. Finally, Denton snapped the chalk in his own hand and barked, "Sit down." Marcus obeyed, his legs heavy but steady. He sank into his seat, every nerve on fire, but his spine remained straight. He had refused, quietly, but fully. The rest of class passed in a blur. Denton lectured about rigor, his voice sharp, as though every word was another lash meant for Marcus. But Marcus barely heard him. He could only hear the echo of his own voice. It's not wrong. When the bell rang, students spilled out, buzzing with whispers. Some smirked as they passed him, others shook their heads, but a few glanced back, longer than usual, quieter than mockery. Something had shifted, even if only slightly. That evening, Marcus sat at his desk, replaying the day. He expected to feel crushed, but instead there was a strange flicker inside him, fragile but alive. Defiant. His phone buzzed. A text from Petra at the diner. Shift tomorrow? Customers asking for the genius with the notebooks. He smiled faintly, but it faded quickly. Genius or not, Denton still held his future in his hands. He flipped open his notebook, staring at the pages of his method. Each line gleamed with precision. He traced the steps with his finger, whispering them like a mantra. It works, it works, it works. The next day, the whispers continued, but their tone was different, less mocking, more curious. Students who once rolled their eyes now glanced at his notebook when they thought he wasn't looking. In the library after school, Marcus spread his notes across a table, determined to keep refining his method. He didn't notice two classmates nearby until their voices cut through. Isn't that the same way he did it on the board? One murmured. Yeah. I copied it down yesterday. Look. Marcus froze. Slowly, he turned his head. Two juniors, usually indifferent to him, were hunched over a scrap of paper. One pointed to the steps, whispering excitedly, "It gets you there faster." I checked it 3 times. But Denton said, "I know what he said. But it works." Marcus's breath caught. He wanted to speak, to tell them they were right. But instinct told him to stay silent. For now, silence was safer. He gathered his notes quickly and left, though their voices trailed him out the door. The following morning another surprise waited. When Marcus sat down, a girl from the back row slid a folded sheet onto his desk as she passed. He hesitated, then opened it under the desk. "I tried your way. It's cleaner. Don't stop." His chest tightened. He scanned the room, but the girl kept her head down, scribbling in her notebook as though nothing had happened. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something crack the shell of isolation. Not much. Just a fracture, just enough light to seep through, but it was there. As days passed, the silence of allies grew louder than the jeers. A boy who once mocked him now lingered after class, pretending to organize his papers until Marcus left. 2 girls whispered over his notes in the library, scribbling quickly before shoving them away when footsteps approached. They never said it out loud, never risked Denton's wrath, but Marcus knew. They saw it too. His method worked. Yet every glance, every note, every hushed conversation carried weight. They weren't just curious. They were afraid. Of siding with the wrong person. Afraid of Denton's authority. Afraid that being seen with Marcus would make them targets too. One afternoon as Marcus left the library, he noticed a boy from his class sitting by the window, phone angled down. At first he thought nothing of it. But then he caught a glimpse of his own handwriting on the screen. The boy had taken a picture of his notes. Marcus stopped. His stomach dropped. The boy noticed him and froze, eyes wide. For a moment, neither moved. Then the boy stuffed his phone into his pocket and muttered, "It's nothing." He hurried away. Marcus stood there, heart racing. Why would anyone risk photographing his work? Unless they planned to share it. That night, Marcus couldn't focus on his homework. He kept thinking about the boy, about the photo, about the possibility of his method leaving the confines of Denton's classroom. His fingers hovered over his phone, tempted to text Petra, or even Dr. York, but he stopped himself. If word spread and Denton found out, the fallout would be brutal. Still, something inside him whispered, "Maybe it's out of your hands already." The answer came the next morning. As Marcus slid into his desk, a group of students were huddled around a phone, laughing and pointing. His chest tightened, another joke at his expense. But as he drew closer, he caught fragments of their words. "Crazy efficient. People in the comments are saying it's legit. Never seen it that way before." Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. Comments? He leaned forward. On the phone screen, his own handwriting filled the frame. His method, step by step. And below it, a comment thread lit with debate. Some users dismissed it as wrong. Others defended it fiercely. One person even wrote, "This kid might be onto something real. Why isn't this taught already?" The air seemed to vanish from the room. His method had escaped. It wasn't whispered anymore. It was visible, undeniable, and spreading. Marcus stares at the phone in shock. As the realization hits, his discovery is no longer his secret. It's out in the world, and the world is starting to notice. Marcus sat frozen, staring at the glow of his classmate's phone. His own handwriting filled the screen, grainy but unmistakable. The curve of his fifth, the sharp angle of his K, the boxed substitutions that had been his invention in the quiet of his bedroom. He felt both exposed and electrified. "Where'd you get this?" he whispered, his voice rougher than he intended. The boy holding the phone glanced up, suddenly sheepish. "Someone posted it on a math forum. Don't look at me. I just saw it this morning." A girl leaned over his shoulder. "Yeah, it's been making the rounds. Some people are saying it's genius. Others are calling it, I don't know, dangerous?" She smirked. "I think it's kinda cool." Marcus backed away, heart pounding. The whispers he had feared inside the classroom had now spilled beyond its walls. His discovery, once mocked as a shortcut, was now on display for strangers to dissect. By lunchtime, the news had spread. Students huddled in clusters, scrolling through their phones, murmuring in awe or disbelief. Marcus caught fragments of their conversations as he walked past. "They're arguing over whether it's original or if someone else came up with it years ago. I saw a PhD in the comments, saying it's valid. Can you believe that? Some high school kid outsmarting the book? Or maybe it's fake." Internet loves fake prodigies. Marcus sat at the edge of the cafeteria, tray untouched, phone buzzing in his pocket. Finally, he pulled it out. Notifications lit the screen. Tags from classmates, links to the forum post, even a private message from someone he didn't know. He tapped the post. His method was there, uploaded as 2 blurry images. The caption read, "Kid in my class just solved a problem this way. Teacher said it was wrong. What do y'all think?" Below it, hundreds of comments scrolled in real time. "This is actually brilliant. He's collapsing unnecessary steps. I teach college calculus, and this is legit. Not conventional, but definitely efficient. This isn't math. This is showing off. Whoever this is, tell him not to stop. This is how discoveries happen." Marcus's hand trembled as he scrolled. For every insult, there was a defense. For every dismissal, there was admiration. He had gone from shortcut king to someone sparking debates among strangers who had never met him. For the first time, his work felt bigger than the classroom. That evening, at May's diner, the shift felt different. A group of nursing students at a booth kept glancing at him, whispering. One finally raised her phone, showing him the forum post. "Is this you?" she asked, eyes wide. Marcus froze, tray in hand. Maybe." The table erupted in excited chatter. "No way. That's crazy," one said. Another shook her head. "Man, you're out here rewriting math and still bussing tables? Wild." Petra leaned over the counter, smirking. "Told you, genius? Didn't I say your brain was bigger than this diner?" Marcus ducked his head, embarrassed but glowing inside. He had never been the center of admiration before. It was strange, almost too bright to hold. At the far end of the diner, Elaine York sat with her notebook and coffee. When Marcus passed, she spoke without looking up. The internet noticed. "I wondered how long it would take." Marcus's breath caught. "You saw it?" She finally met his eyes, a hint of pride flickering behind her calm expression. "I see more than you think. Don't let them scare you into silence. Discovery belongs to the brave." Her words sank deep, anchoring him against the storm of attention. By the next morning, the post had migrated beyond the math forum. Screenshots appeared on Twitter, then on Instagram study pages, then in TikToks, where students scribbled his method on whiteboards, with captions like "game changer." Marcus couldn't walk the halls without hearing snippets. "Did you see the TikTok? 500,000 views already?" Teachers on Twitter are arguing about it. Somebody called him the next Ramanujan. The names, the comparisons, the noise. It all swirled until Marcus could hardly tell whether he should feel proud or terrified. In calculus class, the tension was suffocating. Students who once mocked him now studied him with a new kind of curiosity, even envy. But Marcus kept his head down, notebook closed, pulse hammering. Mr. Denton, however, seemed unchanged. He strode in, calm, controlled, and began the lesson as if nothing had shifted. But Marcus caught the slight twitch in his jaw, the way his hand gripped the chalk harder than usual. Halfway through, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Denton, what do you think about that solution online? The one people are saying came from this class." The room stilled. All eyes turned to Denton. His smile was tight, brittle. The internet is not a classroom. What people chatter about online is irrelevant to real mathematics. But some professors said, "That's enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "We are here to learn properly, not to indulge in amateur theatrics." Marcus felt the sting even though his name hadn't been spoken. His chest tightened. The dismissal was sharper now, not just a classroom correction, but an attempt to erase him entirely. That afternoon, as Marcus walked out, a boy from another class caught up to him. "Yo, you're the one from the post, right? That was sick, man. Don't listen to Denton. People out there respect it." Marcus blinked. Respect, a word that felt like foreign currency in his own classroom. He nodded mutely, but his heart carried the word all the way home. At the apartment, his mother sat at the table, scrolling on her phone. "Marcus Hill," she said, looking up with raised brows. "Care to explain why strangers on the internet are calling you a math revolutionary?" Marcus flushed. "It's complicated." She set the phone down, her eyes shining with a mix of worry and pride. "Baby, I knew you were special, but special gets noticed, and noticed isn't always safe." Her warning lingered even as she pulled him into a hug. The following day brought the twist. A reporter from a local news outlet showed up at the school, camera in tow, asking about the student with the viral math solution. Students whispered, teachers frowned, and Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. By lunchtime, the story had aired online. High school student challenges conventional calculus and wins internet's attention. His classmates crowded around phones to watch. Marcus's picture wasn't there, but the handwriting on the board was unmistakable to anyone who had sat in that classroom. For Marcus, the attention was both exhilarating and terrifying, but for Mr. Denton, it was something else entirely. That afternoon, Marcus entered calculus to find the air thick with unease. Denton stood at the front, hands clasped tightly, his smile more like a grimace. He didn't greet the class, didn't open the textbook. Instead, he held up a printout of the viral post. "This nonsense," he said coldly, "ends now." The paper shook slightly in his grip, though his voice remained steady. His eyes locked on Marcus, sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Hill, my office, now." Marcus rises from his desk, every eye following him, as Denton prepares to confront him directly, furious that the very work he tried to bury has made Marcus visible to the world. The summons came folded neatly in Marcus's backpack, a notice printed on school letterhead, requesting his mother's presence at a parent-teacher meeting. At first glance, it looked ordinary, polite wording, standard phrasing, but Marcus felt the trap hidden in its lines. The meeting wasn't about support. It was Denton pulling the fight out of the classroom and into official territory. When his mother found the slip that evening, she studied it with narrowed eyes. "What's this about, Marcus?"
He hesitated. "He probably wants to talk about my grades."
Her eyes flicked up sharply. "Marcus, it's not failing. I'm not failing." His words came too fast. "He just doesn't like how I solve things." She set the paper down slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then I'll hear it from him." The following Thursday evening, the school's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus and his mother walked down the empty hall toward the meeting room. The building, usually full of chatter, was eerily still. Marcus's palms were damp. His mother's heels clicked with each step, steady and unshaken, but her jaw was tight. When they reached the door, Mr. Denton was already seated at the long table. His shirt sleeves were rolled up neatly, papers stacked in front of him like exhibits in a trial. The principal, Mrs. Hall, sat at the far end, her neutral smile betraying none of her thoughts. "Mrs. Hill," Denton said, rising with stiff politeness. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Marcus and his mother took their seats. She adjusted her bag and folded her hands, eyes steady on Denton. "I work 12-hour shifts, Mr. Denton. I trust you wouldn't call me here without cause." "What exactly is this about?" Denton cleared his throat, adopting a tone that sounded rehearsed. "It's about your son's conduct in my classroom. While Marcus is undoubtedly bright, he is recently engaged in behavior that undermines both the integrity of mathematics and the authority of instruction." Marcus's stomach dropped. His mother's brows rose. "Undermines?" "Yes." Denton slid a paper across the table. "Marcus's exam." Red ink circled his unorthodox steps. "This is an example. Marcus insists on using unconventional methods that, while sometimes producing correct answers, demonstrate a lack of rigor. Worse, he presents these methods as if they are superior. It gives other students the wrong impression." His mother's voice was cool, but firm. "Are you saying my son is wrong? Or that you simply don't like the way he thinks?" Denton's smile was tight. "I'm saying he refuses to follow proper discipline. And lately, with his so-called solutions circulating online, it has become clear that he is promoting a style of mathematics that is not only flawed, but academically dishonest." Marcus's head snapped up. "Dishonest?" Denton's gaze was sharp. "You allowed your work to be photographed and spread without context. That is not scholarship. That is cheating the process. It dishonors the field." The word dishonors hit Marcus like a blow. His fists clenched beneath the table. His mother leaned forward, voice low and cutting. "Mr. Denton, are you accusing my son of cheating?" Denton spread his hands, feigning restraint. "I am suggesting that Marcus seeks attention through shortcuts, rather than respecting the tradition of mathematics. It borders on academic misconduct." Marcus's pulse roared in his ears. He couldn't stay silent. "That's not true. Every step is valid. I checked them 100 times. Just because it's not your way doesn't make it cheating." Marcus, Denton snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. "You will not interrupt when adults are speaking." The room stilled. His mother turned to Marcus briefly, placing a calming hand on his arm, then looked back at Denton. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but fury barely contained. I've watched my son stay up until dawn over those problems. I've seen the circles under his eyes, because he refuses to quit until it makes sense. And you sit here and call that dishonesty. Denton stiffened. Mrs. Hill, I am protecting the integrity of my classroom. No. Her voice rose, sharp now. You are protecting your ego.
Mrs. Hall, the principal, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Her silence only deepened the tension.
Denton leaned forward, his eyes cold. Your son's behavior disrupts the order I maintain. He challenges me in front of his peers, undermines my instruction, and encourages others to question established methods. That is unacceptable. Marcus's mother's voice cracked, but she held her ground. Unacceptable is watching a grown man humiliate a teenager for daring to think differently. Unacceptable is twisting effort into shame. Marcus looked at her, throat tight. He had never seen her this fierce. Not at him, not at anyone. Denton's voice softened, but the venom remained. Mrs. Hill, I fear Marcus is on a path that will not end well. If he continues to resist correction, I will have no choice but to recommend disciplinary measures. The room went cold. Disciplinary measures. The words hung like a verdict, threatening to stain Marcus's record forever. His mother sat back, breathing hard. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly she stood. If you think you can brand my son as dishonest, you are mistaken. Her voice trembled, but it carried steel. I will not allow his work to be buried under your insecurities. If you truly believe his method is invalid, then prove it. In front of others. Not in whispers. Not in red ink. In a formal review. Mrs. Hall shifted again, startled. Mrs. Hill. No. She raised a hand, silencing her. I want a panel. Teachers. Administrators. Whoever you trust. Let them decide whether my son is wrong, or whether you just can't stand that he is right. Marcus's chest tightened. Pride surged in him, mixing with fear. His mother had just thrown the gauntlet down in front of his teacher, and the principal alike. Denton's face paled, then flushed, fury flickering beneath his controlled exterior. You don't know what you're asking for. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. Oh, I know exactly what I'm asking for. The meeting ends with Marcus's mother demanding a formal review, forcing Denton into a corner where his power will now be tested against public scrutiny. The request for a formal review spread through the school like wildfire. Few parents had ever challenged a teacher openly, let alone demanded a tribunal. By Monday, flyers announcing the special review session were pinned to bulletin boards, though written in the sterile language of bureaucracy, evaluation of instructional concerns and academic performance. But everyone knew what it meant. Marcus Hill would be standing against Mr. Denton in front of an audience. Marcus sat in the cafeteria the morning of the review, barely touching his food. His mother's fierce words from the meeting echoed in his head. Prove it. In front of others. Pride mingled with fear. What if he froze? What if the teachers dismissed him just as Denton had? At his table, a few classmates watched him with quiet curiosity. Once, their stares had been full of ridicule. Now they seemed expectant, like spectators waiting for the next chapter of a show they couldn't look away from. That afternoon, the tribunal convened in the auditorium. The stage lights hummed overhead, illuminating a long table where 5 teachers sat, 3 math instructors, the vice principal, and Dr. Hale, the head of the department. Marcus sat at a smaller table facing them, his notebook open, his palms slick. His mother sat behind him in the audience, her steady presence a lifeline. Rows of students and parents filled the seats, murmuring with anticipation. Even Elaine York was there, perched near the back, her notebook in her lap, eyes sharp. Mr. Denton entered last, papers tucked neatly under his arm. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed the room already belonged to him. He took his seat at the opposite table, nodding curtly to the panel. Dr. Hale adjusted his glasses and spoke first. We are here to address concerns raised regarding Mr. Hill's calculus work and the instruction within Mr. Denton's classroom. Both parties will have the opportunity to present. We ask for professionalism and respect. His gaze swept the room before landing on Marcus. Mr. Hill, you may begin. Marcus's throat tightened. He rose slowly, legs trembling but voice clear. The problem I solved looked impossible at first. The textbook's way was long and complicated. I tried something different, not to skip steps, but to make them clearer. He opened his notebook, the pages filled with late-night scribbles, and set it on the projector. His method lit the screen behind him, visible to everyone. He walked through it step by step, chalk in hand. His words steady, though his heart pounded. Here. Instead of peeling each layer separately, I simplified the inside first. That made the outside cleaner. Every transformation follows the rules. There's no guessing, no shortcuts, just efficiency. Veeam murmurs rippled through the audience. Students leaned forward, following the lines. Some nodded slowly, recognizing the logic they had whispered about in private. When Marcus finished, he set the chalk down and looked at the panel. It works, and math is supposed to be about finding truth, not just repeating what someone else says. He sat, breath shaky. Mr. Denton rose immediately, his voice smooth but cutting. With all due respect, what you've just witnessed is not mathematics, it is performance. Mr. Hill cobbles together transformations without understanding their foundation. Yes, the answer appears correct, but this is the danger of shortcuts. They create illusions of mastery while undermining discipline. If we allow students to redefine rigor at will, we lose the integrity of our field. He paced slightly, papers in hand. This is not about creativity. It is about respect. Mr. Hill refuses to respect the established process. And in doing so, he encourages rebellion, not scholarship. The words hung heavy, but not everyone seemed convinced. Dr. Hale's brow furrowed as he studied the board. The panel questioned Marcus next. Can you show us why your method works in a second example? One teacher asked. Marcus nodded quickly, flipping to another page of his notebook. He worked through a similar problem, his pencil tapping lightly against the paper. His voice cracked once, but he pressed on, explaining each step. Again, the result appeared faster than expected, clean and correct. Another teacher leaned forward. He's not wrong, she murmured, half to herself. Denton's jaw tightened. Not wrong, perhaps, but not right in the way that matters. The audience stirred, some whispering agreement, others frowning at the stubbornness in Denton's tone. Dr. Hale finally raised a hand for silence. He looked from Marcus to the board, then back again. His voice was measured, deliberate. Mathematics is a living discipline. Every great advancement in history came from someone who dared to deviate within reason, within rules, but with imagination. Mr. Hill's method is unorthodox, but after reviewing his steps carefully, I find no violation of mathematical principle. His solution is valid. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. A few students clapped softly before stopping under the weight of the moment. Marcus's mother let out a shaky breath, eyes glistening with pride. For the first time, Marcus felt his chest expand with something like relief. Recognition. But before the moment could settle, Denton rose again. His face was calm, but his voice carried venom. With respect, Dr. Hale, validity is not the same as worth. Yes, the solution produces the right answer. But this kind of thinking, improvised, flashy, undisciplined, leads students astray. It encourages arrogance, not mastery. And arrogance has no place in my classroom. The panel shifted uncomfortably. Some teachers exchanged glances. The audience murmured louder now, voices buzzing with tension. Marcus stared at Denton, stunned. Even after the head of the department admitted his method was valid, Denton refused to bend. The victory he had tasted a moment ago now soured. Recognition meant nothing if his teacher still held the gavel. Dr. Hale has validated Marcus's work, but Denton, unshaken, vows to reject it, leaving the room teetering between vindication and continued condemnation. The auditorium tribunal had ended, but the ripple was only beginning. Students filed out whispering, phones buzzing, eyes wide with the kind of awe usually reserved for scandals. By the time Marcus and his mother stepped into the hallway, a teacher was already fielding questions from a student journalist for the school paper. Marcus kept his head down, gripping his notebook tight. The glow of validation, that moment when Dr. Hale admitted his method was valid, should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not with Mr. Denton's refusal still hanging in the air, his words echoing like a gavel. Arrogance, not mastery. By evening, the story had jumped from whispers in the hallway to headlines on local blogs. Teens' math method sparks debate at tribunal. Student versus teacher, innovation or insubordination. The articles recounted the scene in detail. Marcus presenting his method, Denton dismissing it, Dr. Hale validating it. Comment sections lit up with fire. Looks like the teacher can't handle being outshined. Kids smart, but respect the process. Rules exist for a reason. Funny how this becomes news only when the students black double standard much. Systems always quick to silence voices that don't fit their mold. Marcus scrolled through the comments on his cracked phone, heart pounding. Some words cut like blades, others glowed like lanterns. For every stranger who believed in him, there was another twisting the story into something uglier. The next morning, Marcus walked through the school gates to find vans parked outside, cameras mounted on tripods. Reporters lingered near the entrance, microphones ready. Marcus Hill, one called, spotting him. Marcus, do you believe your teacher singled you out because of race? He froze. The question hit like ice water. Dozens of eyes, students, parents, strangers, turned to watch. His throat locked up. I just wanted to solve the problem, he muttered, ducking his head as he pushed past. But the cameras had already caught him. That shaky answer, that glance of fear, it would play on loop for anyone with a screen. At lunch, the cafeteria was a storm of noise. Screens glowed at every table. Someone had clipped his interview and posted it online with the caption "Prodigy or Problem." It was already gaining traction. "Dude, you're trending," one boy said, half mocking, half amazed. "Never thought I'd see the day." Marcus sat at the corner table, tray untouched. His appetite had vanished. He wanted to disappear into the noise, but every laugh, every whisper seemed to have his name inside it. When his phone buzzed again, he merely ignored it, but the name made him stop. Petra.
Saw you on the news.
Customers are asking about the genius busboy. Don't let them spin you. They're scared. That means you matter. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. He needed them. By Thursday, the story had grown legs. Regional news outlets covered it. Then national education blogs. Podcasts debated whether Marcus's treatment reflected deeper issues in schools. Professors argued over the validity of his method, some praising it as a breakthrough, others sneering at its lack of tradition. And in every corner of the conversation, his identity lurked just beneath the surface. Would this be a story if it wasn't a black kid challenging a white teacher? They only want him to fail because he doesn't fit the picture of a math genius. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not, but the way he was treated says a lot. Marcus read it all late at night, the glow of his phone the only light in the room. The recognition felt intoxicating, but the weight of it pressed down harder. He wasn't just Marcus anymore. He was a symbol, and symbols couldn't afford to be wrong. The unexpected twist came at dinner one evening. His mother sat across from him, scrolling her phone, her expression shifting from pride to alarm. "Marcus," she said slowly, "do you know how far this has gone?" She turned the screen toward him. It was a national outlet. His photo snapped outside the school. Tired eyes and a backpack strap slung over one shoulder sat beside the headline. "Black Teens Calculus Breakthrough Ignites National Debate." Marcus's stomach flipped. "They put my face on it?" His mother set the phone down hard. "Baby, you need to be careful. They're not just talking about your math anymore. They're talking about you. And not everyone wants you to win." Her warning settled deep in his chest. That weekend, he tried to escape it by working his shift at May's Diner. But even there, the buzz followed. Nursing students pointed at him from their booth. A man at the counter whispered, "That's the kid." When he passed Elaine York's table, she closed her notebook and met his eyes. "You know what's happening, don't you?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "They're turning it into something bigger than me. They have to. Truth doesn't stay small. But here's what matters. Are you ready to carry it?" Her words lingered long after his shift ended, echoing louder than the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation. On Monday, the hallway chatter rose to a new pitch. Students weren't just whispering anymore. They were gawking. Phones were out, screens glowing. "Look," someone said, holding up a tweet. "He's got professors arguing over him." Marcus's stomach tightened. He reached for the phone, and there it was, a thread from a university professor, line by line praising his method as an elegant rethinking of calculus fundamentals. The thread ended with an invitation. "If Marcus Hill would be willing, we'd love for him to present his method at Jacksonville State University's mathematics lecture series." Marcus's breath caught. The murmurs swelled into excitement. "They want him to lecture? At a university? No way. That's insane." He backed into the wall, gripping the strap of his bag. His heart thundered. That evening, Dr. Hale called their apartment. His mother answered, then handed the phone to Marcus. "Marcus," Dr. Hale said, his voice calm but carrying weight, "Jacksonville State has confirmed it. They want you to present. Professors, students, press, a full lecture." Marcus nearly dropped the phone. "Me? Present at a university? Yes. Dr. Hale paused. You've become part of a conversation that won't quiet down. This is your chance to speak for yourself. To show them it isn't arrogance, it's truth. Marcus's hands trembled. He glanced at his mother, who was listening with wide eyes. She nodded slowly, encouraging. I'll do it, Marcus whispered. Good, Dr. Hale said. But prepare yourself. Opportunities like this shine light, and light brings shadows. The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at the phone, his pulse racing. He sat at the table with his mother, the invitation letter printed out between them. You're really going to stand up there, she said, her voice soft but proud. Not as their target, not as their scapegoat, but as their teacher. Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes wet. What if I mess up? She squeezed his hand. Then you mess up trying. And that's more than most of them will ever dare. Later that night, as the city outside hummed in darkness, Marcus sat at his desk, notebook open, pencil in hand. The problem that had once humiliated him now stared back like an old rival. He worked through it again, his method flowing like water. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was solving for Denton, or for the class, or even for the internet. He was solving for himself. Marcus stares at the invitation on his desk, heart pounding, realizing he is no longer just a student. He's about to step into a university lecture hall, where the stakes, the audience, and even his teacher's shadow will be waiting. The day of the lecture arrived like a storm Marcus couldn't escape. He woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling, as faint light crept through the blinds. His notebook lay open on his desk, the pages filled with late-night scribbles and rewritten proofs. He had practiced until the words blurred, until the logic flowed from his mouth as naturally as breath. Still, his hands trembled when he thought of what lay ahead. His mother waited in the kitchen, dressed neatly despite the fatigue in her eyes. She handed him toast and a water bottle. Eat, she said firmly. Even prodigies need fuel. Marcus gave a nervous smile. What if I freeze? What if they laugh? She leaned close, cupping his face with both hands. They already tried to laugh you out of a classroom, baby. And you're still standing. Today, you make them listen. Her words steadied him. He carried them with him as they boarded the bus to Jacksonville State University. The lecture hall loomed larger than anything Marcus had imagined. Rows of seats rose in tiers, filled with students, professors, reporters, and strangers murmuring with anticipation. The hum of voices was overwhelming, like static before a lightning strike. Cameras glinted from the back, their red lights blinking. Marcus froze at the entrance, his breath catching. He had imagined explaining his work to classmates, maybe to a teacher who cared, but never to a sea of strangers whose judgment could define him. Dr. Hale appeared at his side, his expression calm but his hand firm on Marcus's shoulder. Breathe, he whispered. You're not here to impress them. You're here to show them truth. Marcus nodded, clutching his notebook tighter. When his name was announced, the applause startled him. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real, alive. He stepped onto the stage, legs unsteady, and approached the chalkboard under the hot glare of the lights. His palms slicked with sweat, but when he touched the chalk, something familiar anchored him. He turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of eyes stared back. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. My name is Marcus Hill. I'm a high school student. A few weeks ago, I solved a problem differently than expected. My teacher called it wrong, but it worked. And tonight, I want to show you why. The murmurs quieted. A hush settled, expectant. He began writing. The chalk squeaked as he laid out the problem. Step by step, each motion deliberate. His voice wavered at first, but as he explained, the rhythm returned. The rhythm he had built in countless late nights whispering solutions to himself. Instead of peeling each layer separately, he said, circling a section, I simplify the core first. That collapses the structure and makes the outer steps cleaner. Heads tilted in the audience. Some professors leaned forward, brows furrowed, following every movement. Students scribbled notes furiously. Marcus felt the shift. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was teaching. As he moved deeper, his confidence grew. His words smoothed. His gestures sharpened. He underlined transformations, box substitutions, narrated his logic, like a story unfolding. Mathematics isn't about obedience, he said, voice stronger now. It's about discovery. If the steps are valid, the method is valid. Truth doesn't belong to one way of thinking. Applause broke out in small bursts, quickly silenced by shushing, but Marcus felt it. For the first time, the laughter wasn't at him. It was for him. Halfway through, he paused to breathe. Sweat dotted his forehead, but his chest swelled with something he hadn't felt in weeks. Power. His silence had always been a weapon against him. Now his voice was the weapon. He glanced into the crowd and froze. At the very back of the hall, half hidden in shadow, sat Mr. Denton. Marcus's grip on the chalk faltered. The sight of that stiff posture, that ironed shirt, those piercing eyes. It all came rushing back. The humiliation, the word shortcut, the command to erase himself. For a moment, fear clawed at his chest. What if Denton spoke up? What if he laughed? What if the room turned against him? Just like before. The crowd waited. A cough echoed. The silence grew heavier. Marcus steadied himself, gripping the chalk tighter. He turned back to the board. His voice trembled but held. And this, he said, pointing to the final transformation, is the solution. Faster, cleaner, valid. Not because I said so, but because mathematics said so. The answer shone on the board. The hall erupted in applause. Louder this time, waves of sound crashing over him. Professors stood, students cheered, cameras flashed, but Marcus's eyes kept drifting to the back row, where Denton sat unmoved, his expression unreadable. Amidst the applause and recognition, Marcus locks eyes with Denton, realizing the battle isn't over, because his teacher hasn't come to watch, he's come to strike back. The applause in the lecture hall was thunderous, rolling like waves against the walls. Marcus stood frozen, chalk still in hand, as the sound washed over him. For weeks he had been silenced, mocked, and dismissed. Now professors and students alike were on their feet. He should have felt triumphant. But his eyes stayed fixed on the back row, on the stiff figure who refused to clap. Mr. Denton. The applause faded into murmurs, then into chatter as people began filing out, buzzing with excitement. Marcus's chest heaved, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of speaking. Before a crowd, he glanced once more at the back, but Denton had disappeared. Outside the lecture hall, students and faculty surrounded him. Hands reached out, some to shake his, others to pat his shoulder. Compliments flooded in. That was brilliant. Your logic was so clean. You made me rethink how I've been teaching derivatives. Marcus smiled weakly, thanking them. But his mind wasn't in the crowd. It was in the shadow Denton had left behind. Dr. Hale approached, eyes gleaming with pride. You did well, Marcus. More than well. You taught a room full of teachers. Marcus nodded, but his voice was distant. He was here. Hale frowned. Denton? Yes. Watching. Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't clap, didn't say a word. Hale sighed. Some people would rather cling to their power than admit they were wrong. Marcus nodded slowly, but inside the tension only grew. The confrontation came sooner than he expected. As Marcus and his mother stepped into the cool night air, Denton was waiting near the parking lot. His figure was rigid under the streetlight, his face pale but set. Marcus, he said sharply. A word. Marcus's mother stiffened immediately. If you're here to humiliate him again. Denton held up a hand. I'm not here for you, Mrs. Hill. I'm here for him. His gaze stayed locked on Marcus. Alone. Marcus hesitated, but his mother's hand squeezed his shoulder. I'll be right here, she whispered. He stepped forward, the distance between them heavy with unspoken history. Denton's voice was tight, clipped. You embarrassed me. Marcus blinked. I showed the truth. You made me look like a fool, Denton snapped, his composure cracking. Do you understand what you've done? The press, the professors, they'll remember your name, and mine too, but not the way they should. Marcus's chest tightened. I didn't do this to hurt you. Denton's eyes narrowed. You stood there in front of them all, and proved me wrong. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Denton's voice dropped, quieter but sharper. Do you know why I pushed you so hard? Why I refused to let your methods stand? Marcus frowned. Because you wanted me to fail.
No. Denton's jaw clenched. Because if I admitted you were right, it meant the system I built my career on wasn't as perfect as I thought, and worse, it meant someone like you could see what I couldn't.
The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. Marcus's voice shook. Someone like me? Denton hesitated. For once he seemed uncertain. A boy the world doesn't expect to be here. Do you think the academic world wants to be challenged by you? Marcus's stomach turned. So that's it. It was never just about math. Denton didn't answer, but the silence was enough. Marcus's anger burned. But underneath it, there was something else. Sorrow. Sorrow for the teacher who had traded truth for control. Behind them, his mother called out, "Marcus, you don't owe him anything." Denton flinched at her voice but pressed on. "You can go out there, let the press crown you a genius. Let them parade you as a prodigy. But know this. None of it will last. If you don't play by their rules. They'll cheer today and chew you up tomorrow." Marcus stared at him, stunned by the sudden shift. For the first time, Denton wasn't the unshakable authority. He was a man grasping at control, desperate to hold on to a crumbling facade. The unexpected twist came when Denton's voice cracked. "I wasn't always like this," he whispered. "I used to believe in discovery, but every time I tried something new, I was punished for it. So I stopped trying. I became the enforcer, the gatekeeper. And maybe I took it out on you." Marcus's breath caught. He hadn't expected confession, hadn't expected cracks in Denton's armor. "You made me hate myself," Denton said, eyes glinting in the streetlight. "Because you reminded me of what I gave up." Marcus's chest ached. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, imagined triumph, imagined Denton crushed. But now, faced with the man's broken honesty, the victory felt hollow. His mother stepped forward, protective. "Marcus, we should go." But Denton's eyes stayed on Marcus. "You have a choice. You can expose me, humiliate me in front of everyone. Or," his voice faltered, "or you can forgive me. Let me fade quietly." Marcus stood frozen, the weight of it pressing on his chest. For weeks he had carried humiliation, whispers, and shame. Now the power was in his hands. His mind raced. Expose Denton and risk being seen as vindictive. Or forgive him and risk erasing the pain he caused. The applause from the hall still echoed faintly in his ears. But so did Denton's words. Arrogance, not mastery. Marcus drew a shaky breath, staring at the man who had tried to break him. Marcus is left with an impossible decision. Whether to forgive Denton or expose him publicly, knowing whichever choice he makes will define not just his teacher's fate, but his own. The night after the lecture stretched endlessly. Marcus sat at his desk, his notebook open, pencil resting loosely between his fingers. The applause still rang in his ears, echoing louder than the silence of his room. But so did Denton's face, rigid, pale, eyes full of something between resentment and regret. He kept replaying that moment in the parking lot, Denton offering him the choice to forgive or expose. The power had felt heavy, not like triumph but like carrying a fragile glass that could shatter in either hand. Marcus wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the page in front of him, the problem that had started it all. He wrote it out carefully, line by line, the chalkboard of memory still vivid. Then, slowly, he worked his method again. His hands moved with ease now, not trembling but confident. The solution flowed out as naturally as breath. And when he underlined the final answer, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just math anymore. It was a map of his journey through humiliation, through whispers, through defiance, through discovery. Numbers had given him a language to say what the world tried to silence. "I belong." At school the next morning, whispers still followed him, but their tone had changed. He wasn't Shortcut King anymore. He was the boy who had stood in a lecture hall and taught professors. Some stared at him with awe, others with envy, a few with resentment. But none dismissed him. In calculus class, Marcus walked in with his head high. For the first time, the air didn't press against him like a weight. It was still tense. Denton hadn't addressed the lecture, hadn't acknowledged the storm, but the silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was waiting. When Denton handed back graded assignments, his hand paused ever so slightly on Marcus's desk. Their eyes met. For a split second, Marcus saw something unspoken. Not approval, not pride, but recognition. Denton didn't say a word, but Marcus no longer needed him to. Later that week, Dr. Hale called Marcus into his office. The shelves behind him were lined with books, spines cracked and pages worn from years of teaching. Hale leaned back, folding his hands. "You've done something rare, Marcus," he said. "You reminded us that discovery doesn't belong only to the old, or the established. Sometimes it begins with someone no one expects." Marcus shifted uneasily. "It feels bigger than me now. Too big." Hale smiled faintly. "That's what happens when you touch the truth. It grows beyond your hands." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were emails, Professors from across the country inviting Marcus to share his method, researchers asking for his notes, even a foundation offering mentorship. Marcus's chest tightened. All this because I solved one problem differently. No. Hale shook his head. Because you refused to let your voice be erased. At May's diner, Petra waved a newspaper as Marcus walked in for his shift. Look at you, she said, grinning wide. Our boy made page 3. Marcus groaned, burying his face in his apron. Please don't call me that. But when he glanced at the paper, he froze. There was his photo, not grainy this time, but clear, standing at the chalkboard in the lecture hall, hand raised mid-solution. The headline read, "From Target to Trailblazer, Teen Redefines Classroom Boundary." He traced the picture with his finger, heart pounding. The caption didn't mention humiliation, didn't mention shortcuts. It framed him as something new. Petra leaned across the counter. See? Told you. Genius. At the corner booth, Elaine York sipped her coffee, notebook closed but her eyes sharp. She gave Marcus a small nod. It was the kind of nod that said, "You've earned your place." But even as recognition grew, Marcus's thoughts circled back to Denton. He could still expose him, write an open letter, call him out to the press, demand accountability. Or he could walk away, leaving Denton to wrestle with the truth he could no longer deny. One night, Marcus brought it up to his mother. They sat at the table, dishes pushed aside, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the fridge. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "Part of me wants to tell everyone what he said, to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. But part of me," his voice trailed, "part of you wants to let it go." His mother finished softly. Marcus nodded. "If I forgive him, does that mean what he did doesn't matter? If I don't, does it mean I'll carry this forever?" She reached across the table, her hand warm on his. "Baby, forgiveness isn't for him. It's for you. But so is truth. Only you can decide which one sets you free." Her words stayed with him. A week later, Marcus found himself back in the same calculus classroom, where it had all begun. The board loomed at the front, chalk waiting in its tray. He remembered the first time Denton had called him up. The laughter, the whispers, the sting of humiliation disguised as a lesson. Now the seats were filled with students staring at him differently. Some with curiosity, some with respect, some with envy, but none with dismissal. Denton's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Hill, would you like to demonstrate today's problem for the class?" The room tensed. Everyone remembered what that invitation used to mean. Marcus stood, walked to the front, and picked up the chalk. His hand didn't shake this time. He solved the problem with ease, his method flowing across the board. When he finished, he set the chalk down gently, turned and faced the room.
No laughter, no whispers.
Just silence thick with recognition. For the first time, Marcus wasn't a target. He was a trailblazer. That night, Marcus sat at his desk again, notebook open, pencil poised, but he didn't write numbers this time. He wrote a question. How many other voices have been silenced before they could prove their brilliance? He stared at the words, the weight of them heavy. His journey wasn't just about him. It was about every student who had been mocked, dismissed, erased before their truth could be heard. The thought burned inside him, not as pain but as purpose. Marcus closes his notebook and looks out the window into the night, leaving the question hanging, not for himself but for the world. How many voices have been silenced before they could prove their brilliance? If Marcus's fight reminded you of the times voices were silenced, just for daring to be different, don't let this story end here. Type yes if you believe every student deserves dignity, and subscribe if this broke your heart, because stories like his must never be ignored again.